Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Jax Mickelson, a magnate whose life seems like the perfect postcard of success, has built a world of wealth, luxury, and power. With his stunning girlfriend, Sophia, by his side, he feels on top of the world. But when a figure from his past, Nia Sanchez, appears unexpectedly on a beach, pregnant with his child, his carefully curated life begins to crumble. The painful truth of his abandonment, betrayal, and the life he thought he had left behind forces Jax to confront his past. The story of Jax and Nia is one of heartbreak, redemption, and the fragile journey toward healing. As they navigate the complex terrain of co-parenting and healing, Jax must prove to Nia and himself that he can be the father his child deserves, despite the painful history that binds them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. The Reckoning of the Magnate. The Cost of a Flawless Illusion. Picture your life as a perfect postcard of success, a paradise by the coast, the Mediterranean sun sparkling on the horizon, and a stunning woman by your side. But suddenly, amid the crowd, a figure from your past appears. But this isn't just a ghost from your past. This ghost is visibly pregnant, and the child is yours. What do you do in that instant? Do you keep walking or face the truth behind the perfect illusion? The sun rose over Marba, shining like a freshly minted gold coin, bright and blinding. Jax could feel its warmth on his skin, a comforting weight that mirrored the heat of Sophia's hand in his. Her laughter, a sound made for yachts and brunches, rang in his ears as they walked together. This was the life he had built, a polished postcard of perfection. The crisp linen of his shirt, the soft sand beneath his Italian loafers, and the woman by his side whose beauty was both a comfort and a statement. It was flawless. It was a lie, and then he saw her. Time slowed, like the thick pace of a nightmare. Among the families and laughing groups of teenagers, a lone figure walked near the water's edge. The curve of her pregnancy was unmistakable, standing out against the endless blue of the Atlantic. She wore a simple dress, faded to the color of a pale sky, and her dark hair was a wild tangle, whipped by the salty wind. The way she moved struck him first. The slight limp from a childhood fall, the stubborn set of her shoulders. It bypassed his brain and hit him straight in the stomach. Nia. He hadn't seen her in 8 months since the lawyers had finalized their divorce. Erasing their life together and leaving only sterile legal terms, he had told himself it was for the best, a clean break. He sent the checks, insulated himself with work and Sophia's company, and almost convinced himself that Nia had vanished. But there she was, a ghost under the Costa del Sol's sun, impossibly real and devastatingly pregnant. His child. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He remembered their last conversation, a frantic call he had answered on the way to a board meeting. "I'm pregnant, Alex. Please, we have to talk." He had dismissed her, telling her to have her lawyer contact his. The memory burned his throat. "Darling, you look like you've seen a ghost," Sophia whispered, tightening her grip on his hand. Her voice, usually soothing, now grated on him. He couldn't respond. His eyes were locked on Nia, who had stopped walking. One hand was on her lower back, the other cradling her pregnant belly. Even at this distance, her face showed a deep weariness that felt like a personal accusation. The wind plastered her thin dress to her body, outlining the swell of her stomach, the shape he had helped create and then abandoned. Shame, something he hadn't felt since childhood, washed over him. He was Jax, a titan of private equity, a man whose image was as meticulously crafted as his investments. And yet 50 yards away stood the living proof of his deepest failure. Pregnant, alone, and vulnerable. People were staring. He could feel their eyes on him. Whispers would soon echo across Costa del Sol. Nia took another step, then faltered. Her body swayed in the wind. Her hand moved from her belly to her head, as if trying to steady herself. Her knees buckled. "Oh my God," Sophia gasped, her voice trembling with dramatic concern. "Is she okay?" Time splintered. A part of him, the cold, calculating part that had built his empire, screamed for him to turn around, to pretend he hadn't seen anything. It was a PR nightmare, a personal disaster. Sophia was already pulling on his arm. "Let's go, Jax. We can't get involved." But his feet were rooted to the sand. He watched as Nia's face drained of color, her eyes rolling back. She collapsed, not gently but with a sickening thud. The sound of her body hitting the sand echoed in his mind like a gunshot. A collective gasp rippled across the beach. People rushed toward her. A woman shouted for someone to call an ambulance. His life, carefully constructed, was crumbling. For a brief moment, he was just a man, helplessly watching the mother of his unborn child collapse before him. The lie he had built was shattering, and in its ruins all he could do was stare, paralyzed by the enormity of his actions. The sterile, antiseptic smell of Santa Catalina Hospital felt like a slap after the open, salty air of the beach. Jax walked through the automatic doors, his mind a whirlwind of guilt. He had left Sophia fuming in the car, her protests about image and scandal fading into the background. He followed the ambulance, driving his Aston Martin with reckless abandon, mirroring the chaos inside him. He approached the emergency desk with a clipped, authoritative tone. "I'm here for Nia Sanchez. She was just brought in from the beach." The receptionist, a tired woman named Marga, barely looked up. "Are you family?" The question, so simple, hit him like a punch. He hesitated. "I'm her ex-husband," he said, the words tasting like ash. Marga glanced at her screen, not moved by his tone. "Her emergency contact is Donato Espinosa. He's on his way. I'm sorry, but due to privacy regulations, I can only give out information to immediate family or the designated contact." "I'm the father of her child," he snapped, the words feeling more like a desperate deniation than a truth. Marga's face remained impassive. "That doesn't change the paperwork, sir. You'll have to wait in the designated waiting room." He retreated, feeling the crushing irony. He had signed away his rights when he signed the divorce papers, and now, desperate to know if Nia and their baby were okay, he was treated like a stranger. Sitting in the waiting room, Jax tried to ignore the buzzing of his phone. Sophia's messages flooded in. "This is a nightmare, Alex. My phone's blowing up. Did you have to run after her like that? Think of the photos." He ignored them, his mind drifting back to the voicemail Nia had left him months ago, her voice shaking, asking for one last conversation. He had deleted it, rationalizing it as a desperate plea for a bigger settlement. He had built a wall of money and lawyers around himself, and now he was on the wrong side of it, desperate to get through. A doctor emerged from the double doors, his face grim. Jax stood, but the doctor walked past him to an elderly couple. Jax sat back down, the brief surge of adrenaline leaving him feeling hollow. He had paid a fortune to become a stranger to Nia, and now the universe was collecting its debt. "Handle the press." No comment. It was a reflex, a play from his corporate playbook, but it felt utterly empty. The double doors opened again. David Espinosa emerged, his face still grim, but the sharp edge of panic had softened into something closer to tired resolve. Jax immediately closed the distance between them. "How is she?" Jax's voice was hoarse. David stopped, looking at him with the same cold disdain as before. "She's stable. The baby is 2 for now. Severe dehydration, exhaustion, and a spike in her blood pressure. The doctor called it a preeclampic warning. They'll keep her for observation." The relief, so potent it made him dizzy, flooded through Jax. "Thank God. Can I see her?" David's laugh was a short, bitter bark. "You really think you have the right to ask that?" "She's carrying my child, David. I have every right. A right you forfeited when you sent her legal notices instead of answering her calls." David shot back, his voice low but vibrating with anger. "A right you signed away in a document that paid you for the privilege of your own absence. You don't get to waltz in now smelling of expensive cologne and guilt and pretend you're anything more than the cause of this." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and they all hit their mark. "I didn't know," Jack said, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "I thought she was you, thought she was lying, trying to manipulate you," David finished, his eyes boring into Jax's. "Because that's what you do, isn't it, Jax? You evaluate people as threats or as assets. Nia was an asset until she wasn't, so you liquidated her. Did you ever for 1 second stop to consider that she was just a person? A terrified pregnant woman you once promised to love and protect?" The truth of the accusation left him speechless. He had done that. He had reduced the woman he once loved. The woman who knew his fears and his dreams to a line item on a ledger he was trying to close. "I want to see her," Jax repeated, his voice quieter now, stripped of its usual authority. It was a plea. David studied him for a long moment, a silent battle playing out behind his eyes. "She's sleeping," Heffenly said. The doctor gave her a mild sedative. "I'll ask her when she wakes up. But I'm telling you now, Jax, if she says no, you'll turn around and walk out of this hospital. You will not cause another scene. You've done enough damage for one lifetime." He had no choice but to agree. He retreated to his chair, feeling like a supplicant. Another hour passed. Finally, David reappeared in the doorway and gave a clipped, almost imperceptible nod. Jax's heart hammered against his ribs as he followed David down the hall. The air became quieter, filled with the soft beeps and hums of medical machinery. They stopped in front of a room number 314. David paused, his hand on the door. "She's awake. She agreed to see you for 5 minutes. Do not upset her." Jax nodded, his throat tight. He opened the door and walked in. Nia was propped up on pillows, an IV taped to the back of her hand. The color had returned to her cheeks, but her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. She looked fragile, yet her gaze, when it settled on him, was as sharp as steel. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken history, with betrayal and pain. "Nia," he whispered her name. "What do you want, Jax?" Her voice was raw but steady. There was no pleading, no tears, just a chilling emptiness. He walked to the bed, his hands feeling useless at his sides. "I'm so sorry. I saw you on the beach. I had no idea." "You had no idea I was still pregnant?" she asked, a flicker of bitter humor in her eyes. "Or you had no idea I was poor enough to be walking on a public beach instead of lounging at a private club? That's not fair." "Fair?" A weak, incredulous laugh escaped her. "You want to talk about fair?" "It was fair when I called you, begging you to just talk to me, and got a letter from your lawyer threatening me with a harassment suit. It was fair when I found out you were vacationing on the Amalfi Coast with her from a gossip magazine while I was throwing up every morning, terrified I was going to lose this baby." He flinched. "I can help. Anything you need. Money, doctors, a place to live, whatever it is. Just name what you want." It was his default setting, his solution to every problem. "Write a check." Her expression hardened into something close to disgust. "You still don't get it, do you? You think you can abandon a person and then just buy your way back into their life when it's convenient? This isn't a hostile takeover, Jax. This is a baby. My baby, a human life. And it's not for sale." The rejection was absolute, a door slammed shut in his face. She wasn't asking for his money. She was demanding his humanity, the very part of himself he had systematically dismantled in pursuit of his success. "What do you want from me, then?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Right now," she said, her eyes filling with tears. She refused to let fall. "I want you to leave. Your 5 minutes are up." He stood there frozen, the chasm between them wider than ever. He had come to fix things, to manage the situation, but he was realizing with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating that some things couldn't be bought, fixed, or managed. Some debts were paid not in dollars, but in something far more costly, and he hadn't even begun to understand the currency. The drive back to his sterile, glass-walled beach house was a blur. Jax walked in to find Sophia on the phone, her voice a carefully modulated mix of indignation and victimhood. She was pacing the marble floor of the living room, a flute of champagne in her hand. "Unbelievable, I know. He just left me there. Of course my concern is for the woman, but the sheer humiliation." She saw him and her expression hardened. "I have to call you back." She ended the call and confronted him. "Well, is your little charity case all sorted?" The casual cruelty of her words hit him like a physical blow. "Her name is Nia," he said, his voice dangerously low, and she collapsed. "She's in the hospital. She could have lost the baby." "Oh, please," Sophia scoffed, taking a delicate sip of champagne. "How terribly dramatic and convenient just when you happen to walk by. Don't you see what this is, Jax? It's a setup. She's a gold digger and she just hit the jackpot. The press is going to have a field day with the story of the poor pregnant ex-wife collapsing at the feet of the heartless millionaire and his new girlfriend." "It's not a story, Sophia. It's my life. It's our life," she snapped, her composure finally cracking. "The life I've worked very hard to build with you. The brand, the image. Do you have any idea what this does to us? To me, I'm not just your girlfriend. I'm a brand ambassador. My reputation is tied to yours. This mess you've made, it threatens everything." He looked at her, then really looked at her. He saw the perfectly coiffed hair, the designer dress, the flash of panic and calculation in her eyes. He had chosen her because she was easy. She was uncomplicated. A beautiful accessory who asked for nothing more than his money could provide. She was the antithesis of Nia, who had challenged him, who had demanded his heart, his attention, his soul. He had fled that complexity into this empty gilded cage. "This isn't about a brand," he said, the realization dawning on him with sickening clarity. "This is about a child. My child." Sophia's face twisted into a mask of fury and fear. "So that's it? You run back to her after everything I've done for you, supported you through that ugly divorce, helped you rebuild your image." "You helped me build a lie," he replied, the words tasting bitter, and it just collapsed on a beach. She stepped toward him, her eyes burning. "You need to handle this, Jax. You need to silence her. Pay her off. Get her to sign an NDA so strict she can't even whisper her own name. If you don't, she'll poison everything. She's a threat to us, to me. And you need to decide who you're going to protect." The threat was Nia. It wasn't just about PR. It was about her position, her security. Nia and the baby were an existential threat to the world Sophia had so carefully constructed. "You were never more to me than a distraction," he said, the words as cruel as they were true. "And the distraction is over." He hung up the phone, his hand shaking. Fury receded, replaced by a cold, sick dread. He thought of Nia alone in her small apartment, likely seeing this article at that very moment. This public humiliation, this vicious attack was happening because of him. He had brought Sophia into his life, and in doing so, he had brought this plague down upon Nia. He had ended things with Sophia, but the damage was already done. He had finally burned the bridge to his past, but in doing so, he'd set fire to the very ground where he was trying to build a new foundation. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Nia's name, knowing with absolute certainty that this time an air conditioner wouldn't be enough to fix what he had allowed to break. How do you build trust after such a devastating betrayal and public humiliation? Is it even possible? Let me know what you think in the comments. The call to Nia was the hardest he had ever made. He expected screaming, tears, accusations. He got something far worse. A quiet, profound exhaustion. "I saw it, Jax," she said before he could even apologize. Her voice was flat, empty. "A friend from work sent me the link. Congratulations. You've succeeded in painting me as a manipulative, cheating to the entire world. Nia, I'm so sorry. It was Sophia. I've ended it with her. It's over. I swear I had nothing to do with it." "It doesn't matter if you did, or if you just stood by and let it happen," she replied, her voice breaking with a pain that cut him to the core. "The outcome is the same. My name is Mud. My picture is everywhere. People I know are looking at me differently. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" He didn't. He had always been the one in control of the narrative, the one who paid publicists to shape his image. He'd never been on the receiving end of a public dection. "I'll fix this," he vowed, reverting to old instincts. "I'll have Andrew issue a statement. We'll sue the blog for defamation. I'll spend whatever it takes to clear your name." "No," she said, her voice firm. "No more statements. No more lawyers. No more public battles. That's your world, Jax, not mine. Every time you try to fix things, you just make a bigger mess. Just stay away from me, please. I can't take any more of this. I need to protect myself. I need to protect this baby." She hung up. The finality in her voice was absolute. He had been completely shut out. For the first week, he honored her request. It was agony. He felt like a phantom limb, an amputated part of a family he was desperate to join. The silence was a roar in his ears. He instructed Andrew to issue a single laconic statement. "The story is a malicious fabrication. Mr. Vera has the utmost respect for his ex-wife, Ms. Sanchez, and asks that the media respect their privacy at this time." Then he also had his legal team send a cease and desist letter so threatening that the blog retracted the story within hours. But the damage was done. The lie was out there, living in social media feeds and in the minds of strangers. He realized she was right. His methods, the money, the power, the legal threats were a foreign language in the country of her pain. They were the tools of the man who'd hurt her, not the tools of the man who might possibly heal her. He needed a new currency. So he started showing up, not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency. He learned her schedule through David. He knew her weekly obstetrician appointment was on Tuesday mornings. The first Tuesday. He parked his car across the street from her building at 8 a.m. At 8:30 he watched her leave, her movements slow and careful, and begin the long 4-block walk to the bus stop. He didn't approach her. He just watched, his heart aching with every step she took. The next Tuesday, he did the same, but this time, as she locked her door, he sent her a text message. "My car is across the street. I can drive you to your appointment. I won't speak if you don't want me to. I'll just drive. If you don't want me to, I'll understand." He watched her read the message, her body tensing. She looked across the street and saw his car. For an entire minute, she stood there wrestling with herself. Then with a deep sigh, she walked not to the bus stop, but to him. She got in the car and didn't say a word. Neither did he. He drove her to the doctor's office. The silence was thick, but not entirely hostile. It was a truce. When they arrived, she started to get out. "I'll wait here," he said, "to drive you home." She paused, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and went inside. It became their weekly ritual. He drove her. They sat in silence. He waited. He drove her home. It was a strange, silent penance. He was no longer her ex-husband or her lover. He was her chauffeur, a background character in the story of her pregnancy. But he was there. Slowly, other small acts followed. He learned from a passing comment David had made that she had a craving for a specific brand of pickles. He drove to a store in New York City, bought 3 jars, and left them in a bag outside her apartment door with a simple note. Just in case. He started reading, not financial reports, but parenting books. He read about trimesters and fetal development. He filled the empty spaces in his life, not with deals and conquests, but with knowledge about the child he was determined to know. One afternoon, as he drove her home after an appointment, she finally spoke. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. "Because you told me the baby deserves a father," he replied honestly. "And you were right. I'm trying to learn how to be one. Buying pickles and reading books doesn't make you a father, Jax." "I know," he said. "Being present does. Consistency, reliability, showing up. That's what I failed at. That's what I'm trying to learn now." She was silent for the rest of the ride, but when he pulled up to her building, she didn't get out right away. "The baby's room needs to be painted," she said, still not looking at him. "And I can't do it myself." The fumes. It was the first time she had asked him for anything. Not money, not a grand gesture, just his time, his effort, his presence. "What color?" he asked, his heart swelling with a fragile, painful hope. "A soft yellow," she said, like the sun. "I'll be here Saturday morning." He promised to come with paint. She finally turned and looked at him. Her eyes were still guarded. Her trust a distant shore he might never reach. But for the first time, he saw something other than pain in them. It was a flicker of recognition. A recognition that his new currency, the simple, unglamorous currency of showing up, was finally beginning to register. Saturday arrived, and Jax showed up not in a sports car, but in a rental van, loaded with cans of low VOC paint, rollers, brushes, and drop cloths. He spent the entire day in Niara's small, stuffy spare room, taping the edges and methodically painting the walls a pale yellow. Nia stayed in the living room, ostensibly on bed rest, but he could feel her presence, her quiet observation of his work. They didn't talk much. He would ask a question. "Do you want me to paint the trim white?" And she would give a simple answer. But the shared space, the domesticity of the task, began to erode the formal distance between them. He saw her world up close, the worn armchair, the second-hand books covering the shelves, the single-framed photo of her late mother on the mantel. This was the life she had built from the ashes of the one he had burned. It was small and humble, but it was hers, and it was real. The quiet, steady rhythm of their lives continued for weeks. The Tuesday drives, the occasional errand. He assembled a crib for her, his brow furrowed in concentration over the inscribable Swedish instructions. Installed baby gates, even though she was months away from needing them. Each task was a small, steady brick in a foundation he was desperately trying to lay. He was becoming a fixture, a reliable presence that no longer made her flinch. Trust wasn't spoken, but it was there, a fragile shoot in the scorched earth of their past. Then came the call. It was just after 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in late autumn. He was asleep in his city apartment when his phone rang on the bedside table. He saw her name and woke instantly. His blood turned to ice. "Jax?" Her voice was tight with pain, breathless. "Nia, what's wrong?" "Is it the baby?" "I don't know," she gasped. "I have cramps really bad, and I think my water just broke." "It's too early, Alex. I'm only 34 weeks. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded him. "I'm on my way. Call 911. No, there's no time. I can't. David is away." I tried to call a taxi. They said it would be 40 minutes. "Jax, please. I'm scared." The raw fear in her voice erased any remaining distance between them. She had called him. In her moment of terror, she had reached for him. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice a rock of calm he didn't feel. "Hold on, Nia. I'm coming." He moved faster than he ever had in his life. He got dressed, grabbed his keys. He broke every speed limit on the deserted late-night roads, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. His mind was a frantic prayer. Please let her be okay. Please let the baby be okay. He found her on the floor of her living room, her face pale and beaded with sweat. He gently helped her to her feet, wrapped her in a blanket, and carried her down the 4 flights of stairs to his car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and her sharp, pained gasps from the passenger seat. The ER staff swarmed them the moment he pulled up. They took her away on a gurney, her hand reaching for his for a fleeting second before she disappeared through the double doors. And then he was alone again, back in the waiting room where this nightmare had begun months ago. But this time was different. He wasn't a ghost. When the nurse came to get his information, he knew the answers. Heck knew her doctor's name, her due date, her allergies. He was now on her intake form right under David as her emergency contact. A small bureaucratic change that felt like a seismic shift. Hours passed. He called David, who was distraught, and promised to take the first flight back. He paced. He drank bitter coffee from a vending machine. He prayed to a god he wasn't sure he believed in. Finally, just as the first gray light of dawn was breaking, Dr. Preto, the same doctor from before, appeared. Her face was tired but calm. "Mr. Vera," he searched her face, bracing himself for the worst. "Is she the baby?" Nia had a placental abruption, likely related to her preeclampsia, the doctor explained. It was critical. "We had to perform an emergency C-section, but she's stable now. She's in recovery." He slumped against the wall in relief. "And the baby?" Dr. Prio smiled. "You have a daughter. She's small. She's a little under 5 lb, and she's in the NICU as a precaution, but she's breathing on her own. She's a fighter. A daughter? The words resonated deep in his soul. He had a daughter. Can I see them? He asked, his voice choked with emotion. You can see your daughter now, she said. Niara will be out of recovery in about an hour. He followed a nurse through a maze of corridors to the neonatal intensive care unit. After scrubbing his hands raw, he was led to a small, clear incubator. And there she was, so tiny, so impossibly perfect, with a little shock of dark hair, just like her mother's. She was hooked up to monitors that emitted soft beeps, but her tiny chest rose and fell with a steady, determined rhythm. He reached a hand through the portal and gently placed a finger on her small hand, which latched on. Her impossibly tiny finger skirled around his. In that moment, the entire world fell away. The money, the power, the mistakes, the betrayals, none of it mattered. All that existed was the overwhelming, terrifying, unconditional love for this one small, fragile human being. This was his daughter, his responsibility, his redemption. He didn't know how long he stood there just watching her breathe. When he finally went to Nia's room, he found her awake, pale, but lucid. He walked to the bed, his heart too full for words. She looked at him, her eyes filled with the same awe and exhaustion he felt. Did you see her? Nia said, a tear rolling down her cheek. She's perfect, he managed to say. She's beautiful, just like her mother. He sat in the chair beside her bed and for the first time took her hand. She didn't pull away. They sat in annex-hosted shared silence. They were no longer exes. They were no longer adversaries. They were simply two parents, forever linked by a fierce, miraculous love for the little girl fighting for her life one floor below. The longest night of their lives was over, and in its wake, a new uncertain day was dawning. 2 weeks later, the baby, whom Nia had named Hope, was discharged from the NICU. The apartment he had once seen as a symbol of her struggle was now a baby's room, bathed in the soft yellow light of the walls he had painted. It was cluttered with diapers, bottles, and the beautiful chaos of a new life. Their new reality was a strange dance of co-parenting. It wasn't a rekindled romance. There were no grand delineations of love or forgiveness. Instead, their interactions were based on the mundane, essential logistics of keeping a tiny human being alive. Their conversations were about feeding schedules, doctor's appointments, and whose turn it was to soothe the baby at 3 a.m. Yet within this routine, something new was taking root. He saw the fierce, tireless love in the way Nia held Hope, the soft lullabies she sang when she thought no one was listening. And she saw him. She saw him expertly swaddle their daughter, a skill he had learned from a YouTube video at 4 a.m. She saw him pace endlessly in the small living room, rocking a fussy Hope on his shoulder until she finally fell asleep. She saw him not as the billionaire who had abandoned her, but as Hope's father, a man who showed up, a man who stayed. That evening, an autumn chill rattled the window panes. Hope was sleeping in her bassinet next to the sofa, making soft cooing sounds. Jax had just finished washing the dishes from dinner, Chinese takeout eaten from their cartons, while Nia watched him, a thoughtful, unreadable expression on her face. He dried his hands and sat in the worn armchair across from her. The silence was comfortable now, a shared space rather than an empty one. David called today, she said, her voice soft. He's happy you've been here. I'm glad to be here, he said simply. It was the truest thing he had ever said. The boardrooms and billion-dollar deals of his old life felt like a dream from another existence. This small apartment, with the scent of baby powder and the quiet breathing of his daughter, felt like the only real place in the world. This is hard, Jax, she admitted, finally looking at him. Seeing you here, remembering everything. Sometimes I'm still so angry with you, I can barely breathe. I know, he said, his gaze unwavering. You have every right to be. I don't expect you to forgive me, Nia. Maybe never. All I can do is try to be the father that Hope deserves. She looked at their daughter, her expression softening. She deserves everything. She looked back at him. What happens now? What is this? It was the question that hung between them every day. They weren't a couple. They weren't just co-parents. They were something in between. Two people bound by a painful past and a precious, hopeful future. I don't know, he confessed. We're writing a new book, I guess, and we're just on the first page. He hesitated, then took a leap. It's getting late. Can I stay on the sofa in case you need help with the night feeding? Nia looked at him, her eyes searching his. She saw no agenda, no manipulation, just a tired man offering his presence. She thought of the long, lonely nights ahead, the overwhelming weight of being a new mother. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. Okay, Jax, you can stay. It wasn't a deniation of love. It wasn't a promise of a future together. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acceptance. It was a single shaky step onto the new path they were forging together. A path not back to what they had lost, but towards something they had yet to define. He had once tried to erase her, but now in this small, quiet room, he had finally found his place in her story. Not as the villain, not even as the hero, but simply as a man present on the page, ready to see what the next chapter would bring. The journey of healing is never a straight line. Can trust, once shattered, ever truly be whole again? What does redemption really look like day by day? In the quiet moments between the dramatic scenes, the story of Jax and Nia is far from over. If you believe in second chances and the power of showing up, let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that explore the complicated and beautiful landscape of the human heart.